Welcome to Bump Set Chat, the podcast where volleyball professionals come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. And today, Malia Shoji from UNLV. Thank you so much for doing this. And the way we start the podcast off is with 3 random questions. So are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. What was the last TV show or movie you watched?
Oh, I've been watching Brothers and Sisters. It's like this family soapy drama. It's like been a good distraction for me in the off time. So
All
that
right.
was the last one, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Second one. What's your favorite home cooked meal?
Ooh, probably tacos.
All right. And now next one is if you could have 2 celebrities sit down and have lunch with you, who are the 2 celebrities?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think Serena Williams is someone that I'd be really intrigued to sit down with. Um, and then maybe Steve Jobs. Can they be dead?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. It's your rule. This is your podcast, your rules,
It's so funny. Like I don't follow like the Hollywood celebrities as much. So like to me, like those types of people would be interesting.
Excellent. All right. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast. I got a question to ask you. So you come from a long line of volleyball, between your dad and your uncle and your cousins. What are the backyard volleyball sessions like? Are they intense or it's just banned? Nobody's allowed to play volleyball because everybody takes it too serious.
Oh, that's funny. I can't even remember the last time we played any, like it's usually on the beach. I think the last time might have been at Kavica's wedding. We had kind of the day after the wedding, this big volleyball like on the beach party. And of course, you like have all of his teammates from his like national championship team from Stanford. It's always like fun, but I can't honestly remember the last time we've done it. Probably.
So, your first season at UNLV, how did it go?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was challenging for sure. They always say to you, like, don't like underestimate moving over one seat, right? And of course, like as a young assistant, I was like, oh yeah, I could never imagine doing that. And then as you get, a little bit more experienced and confident, you're like, I can do it. And very quickly humbled to realize, like, yes, that one seat over is no joke. But we loved it as a family, as myself personally. It was just exactly the challenge and change we kind of needed.
Yeah.
And we just love everything about Vegas and UNLV. So it's been great so far.
Excellent. Now you came from up north, right? As you moved from up
Yeah.
north?
So I was at the University of Utah for 7 to 8 years there. And so we, moved to the warmth, which was also nice. Yeah, so I was there as like the recruiting coordinator and then moved my way up to associate head coach. And so I was with Beth for different like iterations within my career,
Yeah.
but it was an amazing experience up there. It made it hard to
Oh, I
leave.
bet. All right, so let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
So my dad's whole side of the family, they're all from Hawaii, right? And so everyone always assumes that I grew up there, but my dad was the brother who moved off the islands. And so Indiana, Iowa, and then the bulk of my childhood was in Colorado, Southern Colorado, when my dad was coaching at Colorado State University of Pueblo.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I asked Erik for a couple of questions I should ask you, and he said, ask her about, how, all her moving experiences.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, and then it was like over to Orange County, San Diego, Oregon, Utah, and now Las Vegas. So lots of stops.
Uh,
Coach's kid.
and now, when did you first discover volleyball?
Well, so I kind of just have grown up around it.
Yeah.
I was the baby in the ball cart when my dad had me after practice. And, I grew up on the sidelines, whether I was like shagging balls or being part of the ball crew to when I finally got older, I was on the bench doing flow charts for my dad. So it's just something that I've just always been around. Obviously played when I was younger, but it was funny because I feel like I've been this lifelong assistant and this
Hmm.
lifelong coach, just seeing my dad do it. And so of course, like I graduate college and I'm like, I'm doing nothing in volleyball. So I played 2 years at Irvine Valley College. And when I was looking to, transfer to a 4 year, I was thinking about, should I keep playing or not? And ultimately I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a little bit of a volleyball break. And then I find myself coaching club in high school. So it's just something I can't quite escape.
Oh, and what is the hook volleyball has on you?
I mean, you were talking about this earlier when we first jumped on. Like, I think there's like a really uniqueness about the volleyball community. And I think for me, it like feels like an extended family, right? So as a kid growing up, my dad would be, talking with Russ Rose and bringing him to my like 12 and under court to say hi. And so like all the coaches that I've just like grown up knowing, to be kind of in the same industry and profession as them is
Hmm.
kind of a transition. And then, I tried my hand in the corporate world. I tried doing, a software company, worked in finance for a little bit. Um, and there's just not that same fulfillment and connection to people
Hmm.
and the development of young humans. And so I feel like now that college volleyball is this huge enterprise, I get like kind of the feel of like what I love about corporate business strategy alongside just
Yeah.
in development and growth.
Excellent. And like
Yeah.
you were just saying, you opted not to play volleyball when you went to college and you opted for coaching. So, what made you want to get involved in the coaching? We know it's in your DNA, but you could have said, no, I'm going to do something different.
Well, if I'm being honest, I had no real experience doing anything but, right? So
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, I'm going to go be a student and I need to find this part-time job. And it just always pops up as the path of like least resistance for me to just have kind of, either I got my master's that way as well. So, for me in college, it was the part-time job. Then I go up and, I got offered a GA spot to get my master's. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't want to coach, but I guess I'll do that to get my master's. And every step of the way, I kind of fell in love with it more and more, just, different aspects of it.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, and now it's like a full-on commitment. We're here, no looking back.
Absolutely. And now, what was your path to UNLV?
Yeah, so when I was in college, like I said, I started coaching high school and club. Then one year, my dad was coaching at Willamette, and he always has these like cardinal rules for me that he would talk to me about, right? Like one of them is like as an assistant, you never get married during season. So one of his assistants broke his rule, and so she was getting married, and she was marrying someone in the military, and had to pick up and leave in the middle
Oh,
of the
shoot.
season. So I was working remotely at the time for a software company, and I just said, all right, I'll come up and help you. I packed up my room in San Diego and I sublet my apartment, and I never went back.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, so I was up there for one season with my dad, and then the administrative team like at Willamette in the athletic department asked me to join them in a part-time admin role. Then a Division II school at Western Oregon asked me to then get my master's and be a GA there. So just kind of like these unique little needs that just kind of further hooked me into volleyball and coaching at the college level.
Oh,
Then from
wow.
Western Oregon, found my way out to Utah.
And then from Utah, you made it down to UNLV.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now, over the years of coaching, what are some of the more challenging things to deal with?
Oh man. I mean, where do you start? There's just like there's so many unique challenges, right? I mean, you have like the individual player challenges, like you are just with these athletes and they're human, right? They're not these perfect like I don't know people. So obviously there's like the human component where they're struggling with that, whether it's academics, something happens at home, like we've had a player whose parent passed away in the middle of season. Um, we've had incidences where like there's been accidents in the middle of season, and we have players like flying back home in like between, the matches and the
Yeah.
weekends. Like you just have those kind of unique things that you just are humbled to remind yourself like they are humans with full lives outside of just their sport. And then probably COVID was the biggest challenge like that I've faced on a macro level in
Yeah.
coaching. That was just so unique. And it all happened at the same time as I had my first child.
Oh, my
So
God.
it was like, oh, there was like pros and cons for sure, because
Yeah.
now of a sudden, like I had the longest maternity leave ever. But at the same time, it was just a lot to go through during that little stretch of time.
Yeah, to become a coach in college from a volleyball standpoint, it's not an easy career. You've got to be able to pick up and move different locations. Some people I've talked to had to volunteer for a couple of years, so you're doing a lot of balancing, just trying to get your foot in the door and sort of make it.
Yeah, it does take a lot of sacrifice, because I think especially coming up as an assistant, like you're just not getting rich as an assistant. So you're challenged all the time where you're going, okay, like, is this worth it? Am I like fully committed to it? And I think that's what also makes it so cool is I look at all of our coaching peers, and it's like every one of them could go make a ton more money doing something else, right? But they just have this love for volleyball and this commitment to like having a bigger impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cool network to be a part of.
Absolutely. And now, coming into UNLV first season, and with culture being so important to a team, how do you approach that as a new coach? So there's a culture here. Do you sort of try to not change a lot of things? What was your approach?
Well, so a little backstory though. So for me, I actually got my first head coaching offer in 2017. And for reference, I was at Utah in 2015 and I was like, why did Beth hire me? I have no clue what I'm doing, right? So I felt very green in 2015. So as I've like interviewed for these head jobs, that was like kind of the balancing act of what I felt confident in inheriting was like, oh, give me the program that's just in shambles, right? Like where
Right.
I can just come and clean up a culture and like just help the struggling organization. So, but as I kind of waited my time and I started thinking about like, well, do I want the challenge of rebuilding something or the challenge of taking something that's really good and trying to find those like little margins that can help us be great? And so after I had children, I was thinking, I'm like, well, I'd rather strategize, right, than
Yes.
just grind from the ground up. So when UNLV came up, a lot of my coaching friends were like, don't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. Like Dawn was so amazing. She did such a great job. It's like such a hard, like, how will you like be successful there with the expectation so high? And so for sure that was kind of some noise in the back of my head. But then the other side of it to me was like, I go, okay, I'm gonna go inherit like a solid culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? Committed athletes. So for me, I was willing to take on the expectations. So I did come in with like more of a tiptoe approach of like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, let's see what we've been doing. And I met with a lot of people, both support staff and players, to find out like what they love and
Yeah.
what is like part of the UNLV volleyball experience that they just think is unique and something that they never would want to see gone. So we talked first a lot about what should we hold on to and make sure we continue to invest in, and then find those like one or two things where we go, hey, we can make some gains in these areas.
Yeah.
So definitely come in with like the idea of enhancing, not just completely
Nice.
overhaul.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And now, how about those, the recruits that were coming in? And, I'm sure you had conversations with them. It's like, hey, you know what? It's, how you were pitched to school, that, sort of culture. We're not changing any of that. How did those conversations go?
Well, uniquely, we had, I'm gonna say, I think we only had one committed recruit when I got here.
Oh, okay.
And I inherited a class of 14 that were going to graduate in
Wow.
2024. So after this fall, it was projected to be 14 players with one incoming commit. So I was for sure, it wasn't as much of the struggle of like, okay, let's try and keep them on and here's what we have. Oh, sorry, there was two commits. And so it was more of like, hey, here's the vision for what we have. And we actually went with a more critical eye of like, are they the right fit for what we're trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
um, just because we knew we had this big group leaving. And so I think it was kind of this like mutual, like, let's choose each other again. And so it was not necessarily me just selling them on what we were about as much as like going, is this person also the fit to the puzzle? Because that was like our small window of time to
Right.
to either pivot or kind of recommit to them. And we ended up keeping both of them. One of them came a whole year early, actually.
Oh, shoot.
Um, so yeah, I think, again, like I said, Dawn had done such amazing things here that it was not hard to go, okay, is this a good decision she made? Because she
Yeah.
made a lot.
Excellent. And now for
Yeah.
those new students that or potential students you're looking to bring in, what qualities are you looking for? Obviously the athletic skill set needs to be there, but what sort of qualities or characteristics are you looking for that from that individual?
Yeah, I think for us, we're really trying to find the athletes that are really hungry and can kind of be autonomous in their growth and development because, you know, it's not that like we had that in spades at Utah necessarily, but we had a lot of resources and support. And so before I knew like what support and resources were going to be here, it was like I need people who are going to kind of like drive their own bus a little bit, right? And it's
Yeah.
like they will take any little thing and leverage it to the fullest. Versus sometimes when you have all these resources and you're like trying to walk them to the edge and you're like, well, can lead the horse to water, right? But they're just still not utilizing them to the fullest. So someone who's super motivated and driven, but also strategic and invested. Yeah. And then
Okay.
again, like a coaching mentor told me this, they're like, you can't teach athleticism. So stop trying to take an athlete and then try and make them, more athletic, making them fast twitch. Like those are much harder hills to climb.
Yeah.
So just for us looking at some like baseline athleticism, knowing that the skill of the volleyball side is something we can maybe develop.
All right. And then on the
Yeah.
flip side of that, what makes UNLV's volleyball program unique, and how do you communicate that uniqueness to the prospective student athletes?
Yeah, so I think, one of the weird things that I actually didn't set out to find was like the connection with the Ninth Island here in Las Vegas. I was just looking at it from a pure just competitive side of like, do they have the resources I had at Utah? And they did, right? So maybe not 5 sports psych people, but they had a whole department of sports psychology. So for me, I was like looking at it from a resource standpoint, but the larger volleyball community in Vegas and the Ninth Island community in Vegas is just amazing. So there's this wonderful family feel and this, like the Hawaii spirit that kind of translates to, I think, our program as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then on top of it, though, you have these amazing sports organizations in Vegas that kind of keep the bar really high on how we do things, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
you have sports performance symposiums and you are networking with like the UFC trainers and like the Vegas Aces strength coach. Like you just have all these high level professionals that I just think are going to only continue to enhance what we're doing here at UNLV.
Yeah.
So there's just like this unique spirit of both like family and high performing and athletes and environments that kind of merge into one kind of superpower is what
Yeah.
I kind of like to think of it as. Yeah.
All right. And now, what is the ninth island? I'm from Eastern
Sorry.
Canada. I have
Okay.
no idea what
Yeah,
that is.
yeah, yeah. So no, so they say the ninth island is like the extension of Hawaii.
Oh,
So
okay.
in a sad way, it's like a lot of people get priced out of paradise, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they find kind of like a next location, and California became so expensive, they just kind of flew past it,
Oh,
and
okay.
a lot of families have settled in Las Vegas. And so you just have this huge Hawaii contingency. And so yeah, coined the name the ninth island here.
Oh, that's cool. What were some of the highlights from last season?
Oh, good question. So, a lot of the things that I believed in at Utah to be true, and seeing how like those values and those priorities were still like the things that are really important, both to me to be an authentic leader, right? Like I'm not saying like they're the keys to things for everyone, but now that you're the leader, it's kind of like the culture is reflective of you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
can you leverage, like we talk a lot about togetherness, and can that actually equate to maybe sneaking out a couple more wins, right? Or weathering some of the tough times. And so I think just staying committed to those values was a huge highlight. And then, this spring is when I've seen it come to even more fruition, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we had the spring where we're just building some trust and relationships. We had the fall to like battle test our relationships and what we were doing. And now, like a full year later in the spring, we're seeing, we're just like being able to enhance and go to another level with, things like our relationships and things like our system and advancing those to like, build on
Yeah.
from the fall.
All right. And now, with spring, what do you look to get out of the spring session?
So for us, this last spring, we really used it to do, we called it like fall simulation. So it did not feel like this like slower time. And we kept it to a couple of week window where we were going to do that. Um, but I think for me, that's where you have to get strategic, right? We had new staff members joining us. So it was like, I got to see what they're like when it's match time and we're in like a really stressful week of training leading up to a match. Um, and then also we had some players in new positions that we needed to get enough data on to say like, is this a viable change to continue to invest in? So this spring was unique for me, but usually a spring is, all right, let's, relax a little bit, just do some skills training. You get your little window of competition in the spring, and it should feel a little bit more mellow, but I think our team and our program are pretty hungry from last
All
season.
right. And
Yeah.
something you just mentioned, the assistant coaches. What, did they stay, or were you building from the sort of rebuilding the assistant coaches that you have there?
Yeah, so we brought in a whole new staff. I think it's pretty unique to see assistants stay with head coaching changes. For me, it was bringing in my people that, like either trust or that you kind of feel like complement you,
Yeah.
right? So I think we're all just unique people. So I think for me, it was last year we had only like we had one staff member change over, and so that just adding one new piece to the puzzle though is such a big thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and we turned over like our lead training position. So we have a recruiting coordinator and someone who's overseeing more of the training side. And so the training piece was what turned over. So spring was a way to like kind of onboard that person
Yeah.
and bring in some new concepts. And so he joined us from Nebraska. So it was really fun to see that, we're not going from one end of the spectrum to the other in our training philosophies,
Mm-hmm.
but there was different little like skills that we weren't training that he brought in that it's just been so fun to see kind of add to our players toolbox.
Excellent. And now,
Yeah.
since starting this podcast, I've had assistant coaches on and head coaches, and the assistant coaches, I get like, they have a different relationship with the players. Like the players can sort of complain or go to, How was that adjustment coming, like for you, going from that assistant coach to now one seat over, and now you're at the head coach where it's sort of players going to approach you differently? Was it a lot of adjustments to put on the head coaching hat now versus being the assistant coach?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the things for my first year is I just knew that I was going to need them to trust me and, build those relationships. So I just kind of led as I always have as an assistant,
Yeah.
honestly, in my relationship. So it was funny at certain points, my staff was like, they don't ever come to us. Like they only go straight to you. And they're like, that's an amazing thing. And I think they felt relieved by it. Right. But at the same time, there was things where it's like, okay, boundaries. I don't need to hear these things, right?
You're right.
Or I'm solving problems that are probably below the line for me to have to be dealing with
Yeah.
because I just hearing all of the things. So this spring it was like a really conscious shift to having my assistants kind of build relationships with the athletes that kind of are reflective of how I used to do it as an
Hmm.
assistant. Then kind of have a little more boundaries with my role as a head coach
Yeah.
and having more hard conversations now that I know they trust me and that the relationships are there and they're strong. Um, so it was more of like a slow shift
Hmm.
in my role. And I know part of me, I was like, was I just like, I didn't have the capacity to like really do this because I just wanted to be myself, or was it the right approach, right? And
Right.
for me, I inherited a talented team that, I think it was the right approach. And we've just like been slowly integrating the standards and expectations. And so now I definitely feel that shift in
All
our
right.
relationship.
Excellent. And now,
Yeah.
with that 1 year under your belt, for the next calendar season or next season, are there certain dates that you're looking forward to, certain matches, or like, senior night's always special for next year? What dates are going to be circled on the calendar for you?
For sure, senior night will be really special for us, but I'm trying to strategize a way to celebrate these seniors all year long, right? Like I don't want it to feel like this huge emotional, like abrupt ending on
Hmm.
senior night. But also now it's fun to have finally gone through the conference once. So it's like, oh, okay, like we know it's a tough stretch to go up to play against Colorado State and then Wyoming. Like those gyms and the environments there were really tough. So I just think now I just feel excited to strategize things because I know going
Yeah.
into it,
Right.
like you don't know what you don't know. So definitely some of the big matches, and we didn't play at Utah State, for example, and they're always like a really tough environment to play in. So that's when I'm excited, and obviously going back to Utah, definitely circled on our calendar.
Excellent. And now,
Yeah.
for new players, where are you looking for, or where are you finding the kids? Are they reaching out to you, or are you guys going to like the club tournaments?
Oh, before we go to that one, I just forgot. We are playing the University of Hawaii as well.
Oh,
We're
nice.
hosting at home. So this spring we went to Hawaii over spring break.
Hmm.
So the contracts aren't quite signed yet. So hopefully by the time you post it, it's signed. Um, but yeah, so we now are going to host them in the fall. So that's a huge match that we're all like excited for. I think the whole community is going to be excited for that one.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, because like you
Yeah,
said, the ninth isle is there. They're going to be able to see.
exactly.
Oh, fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how
And
was
they
that
don't leave
home?
the island for like non-conference very often. So
Hmm.
because they host a lot in Hawaii. So for us to get them off the island's a big feat.
Nice. And how was that trip home in the spring to play?
Oh, it was so special. It was something that I was really doing for my two Hawaii players on our team because I'm like, okay, like I know how meaningful this would be for them. And so we worked really hard to make it happen. And then I started getting that question, right? Like, oh my gosh, what does this mean to you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I never would have thought that I was, gonna coach as a head coach in front of the Hawaii fans. And so it was really special to have my family all there as well. My kids and my husband flew out, and so did my mom and dad.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. And all right, back to
Yeah,
the
back to
recruiting
that.
question.
Yeah.
Where are you looking to find your kids? Is Nevada a hotbed for talent, or are you sort of going, other places, overseas, club tournaments, etc.?
Yeah, so we do have a good volleyball, youth scene here. I think there's, a handful of athletes that usually can be big time players for us. And then like a lot of them have been leaving. We had one on our team here currently. And so I think we're always trying to fight to keep hometown players home. I think that would be really special, but they're also well represented in other teams. Um, and then for us, like I think that's what's so fun about building your staff, right? So I have Brian coming from Nebraska, and he was also at Wichita State, and so he was in the Midwest before, and he's brought this whole new pool of recruits that we wouldn't have either had, inside knowledge
Hmm.
about or relationships that could be, you know, nurtured to kind of find out about different athletes. So I think for us, like I love that we can recruit nationally. I think it's, we have a recruit that just signed up for a camp from Florida. It's like, oh my gosh, like we can pull players from all over. Both because I think there is enough talent across the country, but also because Vegas is, I think, appealing for a lot of people.
Yep, absolutely. And now, are you seeing any bad habits or are you seeing or you wish clubs would do something different with some of the kids you're seeing? You wish they would focus more on the overall skill set, or maybe work on X versus Y. What are you seeing from the kids that are coming from high school into college? Is like, oh yeah, you guys need to be more overall. Be able to serve X versus this way.
Yeah. I think that there's dynamics in the club scene where they try and play as many people as they can, which I totally understand, right? But then, like you were mentioning, like you don't get quite the well-rounded players. You have the through rotation players or the players who specialize in X, right? And so
Right.
I just think, I think there's been like studies and talks about, different countries. I think Brazil might be one where they do everything for a long time. They don't specialize too soon. So that's one thing that I always kind of wish we could do more of. And then also, like I was saying, for me, I'm really big into the performance space. So like all of the different areas beyond volleyball that
Mm-hmm.
I just wish would be talked about more. And maybe these little habits could be built at a younger age where you're prioritizing your sleep, your recovery, your nutrition and hydration, just little things that I don't think parents or clubs are ignoring completely, but I don't think they're as maybe big of a priority as they maybe could be.
Yeah.
You have some clubs who are doing it wonderfully. We have one of our players from Texas came in and she's like, well, here's what I've been doing. She had a regimented like training plan, her hydration, her nutrition plan. So, I mean, there's some that are doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely can, I think, give them a heads up when they get here.
Yeah. Excellent. And now, from a coaching standpoint, what are some things that have helped you be a better coach? Like, your dad, you know, did, as a parent, after seeing your kid play, you're like, oh yeah, here's what here's, I'm sure, after, maybe your dad or your uncle saw games like, hey, here's what you could, do you get a lot of that? Or is it really, they sort of hands off approach?
I for sure have to seek it out, right? I think because we're family, like there's a little bit of like not wanting to overstep, or so I actually find myself like trying to pull it out of them, whether,
Yeah.
whether I'm asking Erik to watch something or it was funny. I asked my uncle Dave, I'm like, well, what'd you see? He was like, oh, I was chasing around your kids and my grandkids. He's like, I didn't hardly see the match. So I'm like, okay. So, um, but I lean on them for different aspects of like hiring and different suggestions on different topics that like only kind of the head coach can kind of maybe understand the full weight of those
Mm-hmm.
decisions. Um, but then I just also think like one of the big things that I got from my dad was he's just like a lifelong learner. He's just always reading, he's always going to different, conferences and just trying to learn about the players as human beings
Mm-hmm.
and learn about different, topics like culture and things like that to bring. So just modeling that like never done learning
Yeah.
is definitely something that I've taken away and try to invest in myself.
All right. And now, this is more of a sort of a mental question or mental focus here is, we have these freshmen that are coming in, they're coming in from college or club volleyball. They're starters. So they're the alphas. They're coming in now. There may be a role player. They may be a bench player. First year away from home. First year at, a whole different level of college play. How do you try to not lose them mentally, keep them mentally focused? Because it's got to be it's a huge load for them to carry.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your first question, right? Like, what are you looking for in recruits? Like, for me, I think having those mental tools to be able to handle that kind of adversity and change, like, it's not necessarily negative, but it's just a massive change, right?
Yeah.
Um, and, we do try and create structure. We are doing a little mentor system where we have upperclassmen as kind of their leaders of this small group. And then you have like a person that's maybe a sophomore junior, kind of in the middle, kind of being more of the guide, and then the new incoming players, and just letting them kind of have resources and support on like what the little things, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you got this is a direct route to this building, or hey, this person like really expects you to be an over communicator. Like if you're gonna be late, you got to talk to them way ahead of time. So just kind of like those little ropes to help onboard them. But we're really strategizing that as a staff
Mm-hmm.
going, hey, mental health is a huge topic and rightfully so. And so one thing I think we could do a better job of is can we help onboard them and prepare them for it so it doesn't feel as like traumatizing because they kind of have been planning for these changes
Yeah.
and knowing that it's not supposed to feel good when you first get here. It's going to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And it just, and we call it like our failure recovery system. And it's just like, can we just give them the tools to like move through those like feelings of failure or those setbacks or those hard days so they just don't get stuck in them?
Yeah.
And I don't know. So I just don't know if you can fully prepare them as much as you can just put on the table like the realistic expectations of it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Excellent.
And here's how we're going to all get through it together.
Right. And now, from a sort of number standpoint or statistic standpoint, how do what's your take on analytics in volleyball? Are you one of these people that look heavily on the analytics or more go with your gut?
I think that I am very much more of the gut, the feel. So I actually rely heavily on analytics because of that.
Yeah.
Like I know that can be my blind spot, right? And so early on in my coaching career, I actually had the luxury of working with a highly analytic person who then like was not as much trusting of his gut.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was awesome for me to experience that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this player is playing better than player X. And he'd be like, well, here's the numbers to tell you that she is absolutely not, right? And going, oh my gosh, like I can't trust my gut all the time, right? So, and then on the flip side, right, it's like in recruiting, for example, like you're never going to know if this one's better, if recruit A is better than recruit B. Like you have to sometimes trust your gut and going through those, the intangible qualities and assessments. So it was interesting, his name's JJ, he's at Arizona State. And so we worked together in our early time at Utah, and he was always struggling on deciding between the two recruits because he's like, well, I don't have the numbers, like I could tell you why this player is better than this player if I have all the data, but you don't have that in club. So I think for me, I'm like heavily reliant on it because it's not in my nature
Right.
to be super numbers driven. Yeah.
Okay. Any words of wisdom for that aspiring coach who's looking to make a positive impact on the lives of young athletes?
Yeah, I just think be where your feet are, and I think a lot of times, I don't know if this is just societal or what it is, but you're always trying to plan and plot your next moves. And then I think you are kind of half invested at where you're at. Um, Even if it's in like the most like small sense of, okay, I'm like thinking about what I've got to do later today, and a player walks in your office and you are just kind of half there listening to what they're going through. And really, if you're fully there, maybe you can have this much bigger impact because now you know them better, right, as a
Yeah.
person. Um, so I just think like being patient and being like so fully invested in where you're at and who you're with, like even in like the day-to-day moments, can I think leverage your career in ways that I don't think you'll ever imagine versus the like I've got to be everywhere at once and I'm here now, but I plan in 2 years to be there, and I hope in 5 years I'm here. And anytime I start thinking that way, I'm never feeling great about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Anytime I've like not thought about it, I've actually surprised myself with the opportunities that kind of come.
All right. And now, from a coaching aspect of things, what is the most rewarding thing you get from coaching?
I think for me, the biggest thing is helping kind of break the glass ceiling of what people think they can do, So you have players that, whether it's their own negative self-talk or a coach that's limited them in their beliefs, but when you can show them that they're capable of, let's just say that they've been a 3 rotation player and now they're passing, right?
Yeah.
Or they've always been told I'm undersized and you're not going to make it at this level. Helping them kind of reach this newfound potential is for sure the highlights. And that can be on the court. It can be off the court for me. Yeah, honestly, in any area of their lives, it's like the most rewarding thing.
Excellent. And now, from this past season, was any good memories from any of the road trips you guys went on?
Yes, we were at Air Force, and I can't remember, we had a little rough patch in our season where we had some injuries, we had some players that weren't fully available, and so we went on this like losing streak. And we went to Air Force and we won, and then we went on like a 2 hour long bike ride on e-bikes through the Garden of the Gods. And it was just the most like refreshing reset for us. Like we were all just like, it was just so cathartic. We were in nature. We were not thinking about volleyball because
Mm-hmm.
you cannot, because we were all trying not to crash on our bikes. We only had one person crash. Luckily, it was an assistant, not a player.
Good.
um, and so, then we go down to New Mexico and we were able to beat them as well. So it was kind of that like reset moment between two matches that we won in a tough stretch of season. And I think those two matches are probably what helped us get into the Mountain West tournament. So But the best part was like we were like all just the wind in our hair and
Yeah.
hearing the mistakes, like this is exactly what I needed. Like it's so nice to be outside. Um, Way more than the outcomes, but
Yeah.
obviously that came after.
Excellent. And now, with this past season's team, who was the joker? Who was the one that you could rely on to just crack that tension when it needed to be done?
Oh man, we had two new transfers that came in this last fall. So we had this whole core of players, right? And so we added in one freshman and then two transfers from four-year colleges and then one JC transfer. Our two four-year transfers were for sure, like everyone's senior video to them was like, they are the funniest person, but it was just those little moments and it was so unassuming and they would just crack these jokes. And that was just like they were the comedic relief for us. Kennedy Prince came from Miami and then
Yeah.
Bibb from Washington. So yeah.
Excellent. And speaking of the transfer portal, I always like to get the coach's take on the transfer portal. It's I for me from what I sounds like is you got these kids maybe 17 or so who committed to a college and maybe they're homesick or whatnot. For me it sounds like the transfer portal is a good thing for them. But at the same time, it can't just be, oh, I've had a bad day, time for me to go. You've got to fight through some of these hard moments.
Yeah, I think there's unique kind of profiles within the transfer, right? You have a grad transfer who's been at a four-year school and they're ready for a new experience and they're starting a new degree. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, you might have someone who, like, yeah, geographically might want to go closer to home. But again, I think there's always that question of like, the adversity and being able to handle those tough times. And will the geography just manifest itself in something else that's hard? And they're not going to be, able to handle that. So there's just different things, I think. And I keep telling my assistant who's in charge of recruiting for us, I'm like, we're not building our program on the transfer portal,
Right.
for sure. Like we look at it to fill and round out some things. We look at it as something to, fill for an unexpected need that comes up.
Yeah.
But for us, I don't know, there's more concerns, I think, and pause for me with a lot of the different scenarios of why someone's
Yeah.
leaving than not. And I think now that COVID's kind of gone, this whole idea of like the perfect transfer candidate of being this grad transfer who's just naturally moving on to a new chapter is becoming less and less.
Yeah. All
So
right.
again, I think that players should have the option
Yeah.
for sure, because some coaches maybe are not providing great experiences for them and they should not feel trapped by any means. But I also worry that we're just creating kind of this out for people who aren't handling maybe some of the challenges
Yep.
in their current situation.
All right. So we got a couple of questions, one from a high school coach and a player. So first
Okay.
one's the high school coach is asking for, developing a team chemistry and cohesion is essential for a successful volleyball program. How do you foster that, positive culture, at UNLV?
For us, it starts with our values. Like I'm very, very clear on that for us. Like, our three are stay together, grow together, compete together. So every value even has together behind it. So like there's just no other option for me. And so I think, we start with that and then also just also understanding that everyone's different. So
Yeah.
togetherness doesn't mean uniform, like trying to help them understand the uniqueness that they each can provide and how we can leverage each other's differences, I think is not just great in our program and culture in a sports sense, but I think in life, understanding that. Um, and so, we do a lot with the disc profiling. So kind of creating this common language where for sure there's people who are way more relationship oriented, right? You've
Yeah.
got your I profiles and your S profiles. That doesn't mean that someone who's not those profiles does not care about being cared about, right? But they might think tasks first and they might say something in a way that doesn't feel very kind, but they just lead with the task. So just kind of cutting through those moments of tension to just kind of like identify the why behind those
Mm-hmm.
tensions. And again, the ultimate goal is to get to them to rely on each other's differences.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
I think the more you just can like message that and
Mm-hmm.
then seeing the value in it, um, is kind of the way you can kind of help that.
All right. And what is the disc profile?
So disc profiling is like an assessment about behavioral preferences. And so it's very clearly not a values, right? So it's not about who they are
Mm-hmm.
as a person, but everyone just has their preferences. So if I asked you like, do you prefer tasks or relationships?
Yeah.
Like that would kind of separate you into certain
Oh,
categories.
okay.
You would prefer a fast-paced environment or a slow-paced environment? Like, would you describe yourself as more analytical or steady? or
Yeah.
an influencer, right? Or more dominant and direct. So like there's just these like kind of buckets that you can kind of put yourself in, but it's never that one person is only one thing. It's
Yeah.
like the natural style is going to be more relationships oriented.
Okay.
JJ, who I coach with at Utah, for example, like he's very much task and analytical, right?
Yeah.
That's where we complemented each other well.
Excellent. Very
Yeah.
cool. All right. And now the high school question was, how can she develop a better volleyball IQ? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I think lots of video. And I think that that's what the coolest thing is right now on social media. You have
Mm-hmm.
access to these ideas, these concepts. And trust me, I'm very much a proponent of teaching my athletes that like what you see on TikTok is not just to be consumed as fact, right? Like when it's
Right.
like the TikTok doctor told me to do X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, 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 no. But from a volleyball standpoint, there's a lot of good content out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of good ideas that at least could further your IQ. And it's a really easy, digestible, and accessible way to do it.
Yeah.
I think going to different camps and clinics is a great way. And then I just think playing the game, like you'll figure out some shots if you are just getting blocked over and over, even if it's at an open gym with, let's
Right.
just say, players, right? Like you'll figure it out if you're thrown in the deep end.
Yeah.
So I think that balance of like learning, training, but then just at the end of the day, you got to just play.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great point. Just play in an open gym because you could have, volleyball is a sport for somebody who can play their entire life. And there's some shots that old people can make that, the young people don't know, like those deep corners or whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you ask Erik and Kavica, like they played on that baby court at outrigger. And I swear that's where they just developed so much skill because they just figured it out. And the goal was to get on the big court, right?
Yeah.
Like it was just like shrunken one. And they're like seeing all the older players over there and they're like, oh, one day we'll be over there. But they're like kind of role modeling it and trying to play around with different things.
Yeah.
So
What do you think what's your opinion of the state of the game today?
I think it's just I don't know, it's just in this really cool space, both this intersect of the investment and excitement around female sports. I think, riding the wave of what we're seeing with like the WNBA and women's basketball at the college level, on top of having pro volleyball coming to the United
Mm-hmm.
States. And also I just think there's just this fun innovation around the game. Like you have concepts from the men's game being brought in, you have international concepts, again, a lot because of access and
Right.
technology. Um, and so I just think it's just an exciting time and it's growing rapidly. So I'm excited to kind of see where we go.
All right, excellent. And now, what's your take on the new rules for the next season with the double contact?
I'm excited for it. I think that it will be very interesting to see how the fans adjust to it.
Mm-hmm.
We were at Hawaii and Hawaii setter doubled the ball. Our player blocked it first before the attacker touched it, and they got a double call, right? And then of course the fans who are very educated in Hawaii were like, no, like there's no double calls, right? So both for like well-educated fans, some of the like little nuances, but
Mm-hmm.
then the ones who are not. And so it's just going to be interesting.
Yeah.
One thing we're doing with our conference is trying to make some like video clips that the players do to play in match,
Yeah.
like educate fans on the front end, just to make it enjoyable. Or maybe
Yeah.
they like playing with the refs, so maybe that's part of it. But
Yeah, funny story here. Our high school volleyball coach, I talked with her and said, why she coached basketball and volleyball. She came to volleyball and said, why do you enjoy coaching volleyball more? She said, because the fans don't know the sport. They don't know the doubles. So it's like they're not getting coached over the shoulder by everybody. And I thought that was a very
right,
funny,
right.
funny
Oh
response.
man, yeah, my husband coached basketball at the college level, and so like we'll go to like UNLV games, right? And you're sitting in the stands, and you just hear the commentary by fans, and
Right.
he's just, oh my goodness, like the amount of things. Like when I was on the bench, I didn't hear all these things, but like everyone thinks they know, and
Yeah. And now if I asked your players what was their least favorite drill, what would they say?
oh, good question. Well, we had a drill called Doom or Die, which was basically the odds completely stacked against them, out of system attacking against a full defense, and like really tough rules. Like if you got stuff blocked, it was -5. So like I think it was a drill that was designed to get stuck in and be frustrated with.
Yeah.
So probably that one for sure.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, hey, you survived the podcast. But before you
Awesome.
go, I need to ask you to suggest somebody in your circle, ex-coach, ex-player, somebody in your circle you think you should come on and share their story.
Ooh, good question. Um, I think from a player's lens, I think Berkeley Oblad would be an interesting one. She just finished her first pro season, and I think the unique thing about Berkeley was I coached her at Utah,
Yeah.
but she's the hometown hero here, and she is from Henderson. I think that the clubs or the pro season was, ups and downs and just unique, but she's still so grateful to be getting this opportunity. So
Yeah.
she'd be one that would be unique to have on. Um, I also think that, Brian, my new assistant coach who came from Nebraska, he would be one that would be really fascinating to talk to
All
because
right.
he was in the role at Nebraska as the video coordinator, but like overly qualified in that role. So he was former assistant, but he just wanted to, like, he was like, if I'm not going to get assistant jobs that I'm really passionate about, then I'll just go learn from the best, right?
Right.
So when you talk about the intersect of technology and video and training,
Mm-hmm.
him having such a narrow focus, he's done that at a really high level. Um, and so I think he would be an interesting one because he's literally studying volleyball all day
Yeah.
long before, right? And so using it
Excellent.
to teach, he'd be a good one too.
All right. Yeah, with the volleyball circle so small, I had actually Jalen Rays from Nebraska on. So yeah, so that's a good call.
Jalen gave me Brian's
Oh, no
name,
way.
a reference. So again, the Hawaii connection on top of the volleyball
Mm-hmm.
connection keeps the circle small. But yeah, he'd be a great one.
All right. And now away from volleyball, what do you enjoy to do?
Yeah, we're in the thick of it with my two little kids. So I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So that question actually is like, oh, I don't know. What do I do? I mean, so just family time right now is kind of what we've been doing. But pre-kids, it was like definitely traveling, hiking, getting outdoors, just because we're an indoor sport, right? So like connecting with nature is always exciting for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to meet you, and good luck next season.
Thank you so much.
Hey, she's a beauty.